Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up on the show today, we have a theme. Division is a choice, and you don't have to participate in it. We're going to have several examples of stories that I believe are completely fabricated instances of division in this country, attributable to people who just crave fake anger and fake outrage. Also, as concern grows over efforts to hide the impacts of Governor Jay Inslee's carbon tax, there are some media outlets who are just blatantly giving cover to Attorney General Bob Ferguson, whose office is involved in that scandal. So we'll talk about that because it is the exact opposite of what media outlets should be doing when it comes to government accountability. All of that coming up and much more. But first, if you have not become an Undivided subscriber already, join our growing community of people who crave common sense, not drama in division. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. All right, we want to start today by following up on a story that I'll tell you the entire internet in Washington state is talking about, as they should, because it's not the sexiest story of government. How do I want to put it? I mean, it's incompetence in a certain sense, but I think really government corruption. So we talked about it on the show yesterday, how there are these efforts to hide the impacts that Governor Jay Inslee's cap and trade program, which I call a carbon tax, is having on you, the taxpayer at the pump. And now when it comes to, if you're a Puget Sound Energy customer, your rates and your bill. And so you have the governor who is, really believes that the carbon tax is the way to reduce our carbon impact and save the world. But he doesn't want to acknowledge what is true, which is, okay, well, that's going to raise the price of gasoline. It already has by a substantial portion. And now that's also going to raise the rates for Puget Sound Energy customers. And it's like he claims to believe in the policy, but he won't just own the consequences of it. So anyway, yesterday we talked about how Puget Sound Energy, they go to the State Utilities Commission, they say, hey, we need a rate hike because of the carbon tax and the cap and trade program. It's increasing costs for us. And so the Utilities Commission, on the advice of an attorney from the Attorney General's office, says, okay, yeah, do the rate hike, but don't put it as a line item on the bill. So when you and I get our Puget Sound Energy bill, we're going to have a roughly 3% rate hike, but there isn't going to be a line item on there that says why. Which is ridiculous. And they're saying, oh, that's pretty standard, even though Puget Sound Energy has said that they wanted to put it as a line item on your bill so you were fully informed about why you were seeing the increase. So anyway, that story breaks. I think it was kind of over the weekend. And then it really picked up steam yesterday. I know that we shared our clip talking about this controversy, and it went all over on social media. And Nicole and I couldn't help but notice that on the same day where people are talking about the role of the Attorney General's office in advocating that this rate increase be hidden from you, the same day, what does the Seattle Times editorial board publish? Was it criticism and a critique of yet another story where Bob Ferguson and or his office is hiding information from people? No. They posted an op-ed praising Bob Ferguson for doing something that he should have done a while ago. The title of the op-ed, AG Bob Ferguson wisely chooses transparency in campaign finances. They say his voluntary action to make public the names of his previous donors sets the tone for openness and fairness in the race and beyond. So, look. Bob Ferguson, there was this, amid the many controversies of things that he tries to hide or things his office tries to hide, there was this controversy around, okay, he's launching his campaign for governor. He's sort of the heir apparent to Jay Inslee, and he's moving all this money over from his old campaign account into this new campaign for governor. And the question was, and what the state eventually decided is, yes, you need to provide the names of who donated that money that you're moving over, because then that factors into how much or whether they can donate to your current campaign. So Bob Ferguson's like, all right, moving forward, we'll abide by that ruling. But it was up to him whether he wanted to, in retrospect, provide the names of donors whose money he moved over from one account to another. And he decided he was going to do that, even though he didn't technically have to. And the Seattle Times editorial board wants to celebrate celebrate his care and concern for transparency. It says his decision to do it sets the tone for openness and fairness in the race and beyond. Meanwhile, the biggest story in the state that day when they published this op-ed is that an attorney for the Attorney General's office actively encouraged the Puget Sound Energy to hide the reason your rates were increasing. And again, this comes after a long list of stories about Bob Ferguson's office having, to pay up a bunch of money, meaning taxpayers having to pay up a bunch of money because they're hiding documents in a lawsuit against DSHS. I mean, there are just so many examples of this. So for the Seattle Times editorial board, which traditionally I think has been getting better and better at holding people accountable, for them to, on the same day that this Puget Sound Energy story is trending, for them to publish this op-ed celebrating his transparency in campaign finances is just so wild to me. And then I also wanted to note that yesterday I had a little moment of applause for King 5 News, because King 5, I think, does the worst job when it comes to holding the party in power accountable, which should be the primary goal of the media, is that, okay, who's in power? It's Democrats. So even if you really love Democrats, you're still responsible for holding them accountable for everything that they do. And I think King 5 of all the TV stations does the worst job of that. And I think it's motivated by political bias. But so they had a really good headline. I was telling Nicole over the weekend on this Puget Sound Energy story. The headline, Puget Sound Energy not permitted to notify customers of the rate hike. So I was like, oh, I saw King 5. They're like doing their job out there. They got this great headline. But then I went and read the story. Guess what they don't mention in the story? They don't mention any tie to Attorney General Bob Ferguson's office, which I think is the most egregious part of the story. Because the attorney in his office who suggested that they don't include this as a line item is an attorney who is supposed to be working on behalf of ratepayers. Why would it be working on behalf of ratepayers to hide information from ratepayers about why they have to pay more money for their energy? And so it just was unreal to me that here you have King 5 leaving out what I think is a really critical part of the story, and it just happens to be a part of the story that doesn't include the guy who might be our next governor. Like, that's the part they conveniently leave out, which I think is absolutely absurd. Now, we have also been reaching out to the entities involved in all of this. And I will say we did hear back from the governor's office, from Mike Falk, who's the press secretary for Governor Jay Inslee, essentially saying, hey, do you agree with this? Do you agree with the decision not to allow Puget Sound Energy to put that as a line item? Mike Falk told us in a statement, in part, I think that they don't like that we've framed this as they're doing it to hide the impacts of Jay Inslee's carbon tax. Mike Falk said the governor's office was not involved in the decision regarding what appears on customers' bills. It was UTC's decision, the Utilities Commission, and is consistent with past decisions about itemizing details on bills. And then Mike Falk went on to tell us that they didn't agree with our characterization of the cap and trade program as a carbon tax. They say it's not a tax. And I responded and said I will continue to refer to it as a tax because for all intents and purposes, that is the result for Washingtonians. It is a tax on them. It's a tax on them at the pump. You can call it whatever you want. I know it's a big, fancy, complicated program, but to me, I'm going to call it a tax because I believe that that is the best reflection of what the impact is on consumers and on Washingtonians. We have also reached out, and Nicole, if you want to hop in with me quick, because we did reach out to the Attorney General's office, obviously, because I'm curious. Does the Attorney General's office think it's good practice for his attorneys who are supposed to be representing the interests of the public, and in this instance, representing the interest of ratepayers, is it good practice for them to do something that hides information from ratepayers? It was funny because last night on the live show, or on the live Q&A, we do a monthly live Q&A with subscribers, and last night we were talking about, we're doing all this follow-up on the story, and I had mentioned the Attorney General's spokesperson, Brianna Aho, who I was like, she's great. Yeah, she'll get back to us. Nicole, do you want to share the response that we got?
Well, she did get back to us.
She did get back to us.
So she got back to us yesterday after the show, or right as the show was ending, is when I sent that request for comment from Bob Ferguson. Yeah. And I got a response from her saying, what's your deadline? And I said, well, by tomorrow would be great because we covered the story today. I did not say because we covered the story today already. Yeah. but yeah, so she said okay, and then I didn't hear from her until 9:30 this morning, and she said, I saw that Brandi chose to cover it last night, and it says, it really doesn't seem that you're looking for an answer in good faith. Are you still looking for a response here? And I said, yes, we did do a live show at noon yesterday, and we covered the story, which is probably why you saw it posted later. It wasn't our story, so we reported the news and then requested a comment. I gave this morning as a deadline so that we could revisit. Would love for an update today with the AG's comment.
Yeah, because this would be the part in the show where we would offer the comment that the Attorney General's office has, just like we offered the comment that the governor's office had. The governor's office also kind of pushed us onto Puget Sound Energy and the UTC to ask them some follow-ups, which we did have some follow-up questions for Puget Sound Energy, which we will also bring to you. But the idea that they would respond and say, is this request in good faith? Why? Right. Because I have a political agenda? Yeah, I have a political agenda. My political agenda is holding government officials accountable. Right. And that should be the political agenda of every single journalist in Washington state. Just because I am not the biggest fan of Bob Ferguson as a politician, it has nothing to do with him personally, doesn't mean that I'm not looking for information. If we were just going to do a regular old opinion show where I didn't care what they thought, we wouldn't reach out to them for comment. That's not just a matter of course. It's because I'm genuinely curious to hear from Bob Ferguson whether he agrees with what his attorney recommended in this case. That is my duty to you. That is our duty to you. And so to suggest that, and frankly, it doesn't matter if my question is in good faith. I've asked it. I'm a member of the media. And even if I were a regular citizen who didn't have a podcast and I asked it of the Attorney General's office, you work for us. It doesn't matter if I come to you with a question in good faith. That's your job, and we pay you to do that job. So that makes absolutely no sense to me. And yes, we will share if he has an opinion on the matter, which I hope he would. He wants to be the next governor. He runs that office. We will absolutely share that comment.
But we have not, she missed the deadline after that.
But again, so if we're doing like just behind the curtain, if we're doing an exclusive story where we're going to break it, right? We will reach out before we do it to individuals involved to get comment and give them an opportunity to respond before we do the story. That doesn't mean we're going to wait, weeks, months, years until they respond. No, we'll give them sometimes if it's urgent, a few hours to respond. We'll update the story later. But this wasn't that. This story had already broken over the weekend. It had been posted by multiple outlets, including Todd Myers over at Washington Policy Center, including King 5, including was it the Columbian or
the Chronicle?
The Chronicle.
Which I would be surprised if nobody had reached out to his office.
So clearly they already know. I would guarantee people have reached out. You would hope. And so we're talking about news on the show that's already happened, and then we are going the extra step of reaching out to them to say, hey, how would you respond to this news that's been out there for 3 days? Because again, we did our first live show on Monday. I think it came out over the weekend, maybe even Friday evening. So that's a ridiculous response to ask, are you asking this in good faith? Yeah, Brianna, you've been working in that position in the Attorney General's office for a long time. You know that it's not uncommon for stories to break and then to have media outlets come to you after the stories are already out there and say, hey, is there something you'd like to add or contribute? So that's ridiculous. And again, it's a taxpayer-funded position, so it doesn't matter if I'm in good faith or not. So we will continue to update you on this, but I don't want to let this one go because to me, it is such an egregious example of the government, of what the government thinks of you, of what the government thinks of us, and what the government thinks about our concerns about our budget and our finances. It's like they think so low of you that they're like, oh yeah, hide that from them. They won't do anything. They won't speak up about it. Media won't cover it. And then you can't let them continue to get away with that. I mentioned yesterday that it is the perfect example of why one-party rule has to die in Washington state. We need some semblance of balance because when you have balance and when you have a party that isn't 100% convinced that they're all going to get their jobs back, then they can't act like this. So that's what we're working toward. All right. There was another. So we talked about on the show, gosh, was it last week already? August is flying by.
It really is.
What is happening to our summer? So last week on the show, we had on the Thurston County Sheriff, Derek Sanders, because they had this wild story there where there was this chase involving a car full of mostly juveniles, one 18-year-old who was driving. The car had been stolen. It just committed a hit and run. They crash into the woods. Some of them bail out. They're later found in a porta potty. And anyway, the 18-year-old ends up in front of a judge, and the judge says, you can go home. No bail. Didn't set a single dollar of bail to make sure that that 18-year-old comes back to Thurston County to answer for their alleged crimes. So now there's another story out of Thurston County, and I think this also just shows, some of these issues that used to be just King County issues, Seattle issues, the tentacles. They just keep going out, and pretty soon this is going to be standard course of events across Western Washington, and then God forbid it's going to head over the Cascades, and this is the kind of crap that we're going to see in courtrooms across the state unless we stop it, unless we care about it enough to stop it and encourage our neighbors and our families and friends to stop it as well. Now, this is actually much worse, much, much worse than the car thief being let off without bail. Much, much worse. So the city of Tenino, the Tenino Police Department put out this press release yesterday after our show was done on Monday. And in it, they tell the tale of a man they arrested under suspicion of child rape in the first degree. It's a pretty short press release, so allow me to read it to you. On July 27th, Tenino police were contacted by a mother who stated that her ex-husband from Thurston County had been raping her juvenile daughter from 9 years old to 14 years old. On August 23rd, after a thorough investigation, so nearly a month-long investigation, Tenino police and the Washington State Patrol conducted a tactical operation where the suspect was taken into custody. He was then booked into the Thurston County Jail. After careful review, the Thurston County Prosecuting Attorney's Office filed charges for multiple sex crimes, including rape of a child in the first degree. Although the Thurston County Prosecutor's Office requested bail be set at $250,000, a Thurston County Superior Court judge set bail at only $10,000. The man was released from custody soon after his bail was posted. $10,000 for an accused child rapist. A man who is accused of raping his own child from the age of 19 to the age of 14. $10,000 bail, which, by the way, is only $1,000 cash. And I know, innocent until proven guilty. Everyone has a constitutional right to bail, but you only have a constitutional right to reasonable bail. And I cannot, for the life of me, understand how anyone who works in the judicial system would believe that that is a reasonable amount of bail. And this wasn't some fly-by-night investigation. And I know that there are people out there who make up all sorts of accusations against exes. And again, this man is innocent until proven guilty. But this was a month-long investigation between the Tenino Police Department and the Washington State Patrol. It was a review from the prosecuting attorney's office for what charges were warranted in this case. And then that man stands in front of a judge in Thurston County, and that judge decides, even though there's a request for $250,000 bail because of the egregious nature of the crime accused, that $10,000 bail is appropriate. That's genuinely sick. How have we gotten to this place? And I agree with the sentiment. We were talking on the show a couple weeks ago that I don't want to call out judges by name when they're involved in an ongoing trial. I just think that that can lead to what might be perceived as interference in the criminal justice process. But when it comes to judges at first appearance who probably aren't even going to be the trial judge on a case down the road, I'm perfectly fine with naming those judges. And I think that we have to, because judicial races often just go unnoticed, undercovered. And so I want to talk about both the judges in these two instances that I just outlined. So the judge in the case I just talked about, who set $10,000 bail for an accused child rapist, is Judge Sharonda Amamio, who was elected in 2020. The judge who set $0 bail for the 18-year-old who allegedly stole a vehicle, hit a car, led police on a high-speed chase is Judge Allison Zip, who was appointed by Governor Jay Inslee in 2021. Judges play such a critical role in keeping communities safe. Truly. Their judgment as to what is an appropriate amount of bail for someone who has been accused of a violent crime, their judgment can be the difference between whether that person commits another crime, has the opportunity to commit another crime, to victimize more people. And you would hope that every single judge takes that responsibility seriously. Again, you have a constitutional right to bail. But that doesn't mean that you get to walk out scot-free, or that doesn't mean that you can be accused of raping your child and you can post $1,000 cash and be out in a couple hours. This is really insane stuff. And again, this is Thurston County. We have seen this sort of sentiment when it comes to the judicial branch really start to infiltrate in superior courts in various counties in the state of Washington. It's not just a King County issue anymore. And I know that coming up on the show tomorrow, Representative Travis Couture, who represents this area in Thurston County, is going to join us because he and I know some other representatives, including Dan Griffey, are just livid over all this, and they should be. And I think that you have to keep raising awareness for it, and you have to keep speaking out about it. And I don't know, I don't think politically speaking, from a legislative perspective, there's much that can be done because the judicial branch has to be allowed to operate independently. Judges have to have discretion. They do. Prosecutors should have discretion. But when they are abusing that discretion, the voters are the only ones who have an opportunity to hold them accountable for it. And that's what needs to be done. All right, coming up next, a local school district is forcing white educators to rate their level of white privilege. We're going to talk about it and read through some of the questions that these school staffers are being asked to answer. That's going to come up next in our segment, Unbelievable. But first, we've been talking about our friend Wes Jones, a wonderful real estate agent in our area. If you are thinking about selling your home, I highly recommend you checking out sellwithwes.com and reading up about his Listing Boost concierge service. It's something that Susan in Federal Way took advantage of. She'd lived in her home for 25 years, wanted to sell it, needed to sell it, but knew it needed some updates. So she called Wes Jones.
I knew I had to paint. I knew I needed to get new flooring. I needed to get new lighting. I told him up front that I was very interested, that I did not have the time or the finances to do what needed to be done. And he immediately jumped in with, well, I do. Work started immediately. And I would say in 2 to 3 weeks, they had landscaping done. They had all the painting done. The new floors were put in. All the lighting was put in. It just was all so fast. And the rest is history. It was on the market for 7 days. I was able to get well over listing price.
To be specific, Susan got 20 offers, sold it for 15% over list price, and ended up getting $200,000 more than an investor offered her before the renovations. Yeah, that's a great story. We love to hear success stories like that. $200,000 just by calling Wes Jones and having him and his team come in and do the Listing Boost concierge service. That's awesome. And it's not a service that all real estate agents offer. So if you are in the market to sell your home, either now or you're thinking about it coming up pretty quick, visit sellwithwes.com, and start by simply using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, if you're a white teacher or staff member in a particular local school district in Washington state, be advised that you may have to answer some questions about your level of white privilege. Let's get to it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop. Okay. So we get a bunch of great tips when it comes to our public education system in Washington State. And by great tips, I mean soul-sucking in nature. And sometimes we just have to sort through them all and figure out, all right, which one is the worst and which one is probably happening in more than one place. So I'm going to note that we're not going to say for now the school district that's involved in this, because the person who provided us with this form asked us not to, but we're working to confirm through other means how many, if it's more than one local school districts in Washington State, this sort of handout is being utilized at. So I'm going to, before I show it to you, just to set it up. So at this school district, if you come in and you're hired and you're white, you're probably going to get this form. And it asks you to score yourself on your level of white privilege by answering a series of questions and scoring yourself 0 to 5. So 0 if the statement is seldom true for you, and 5 if the statement is often true for you. Okay, so I'm white. All right, let me take this little self-evaluation. Okay, so the questions are as follows. Because of my race or color, 1, I can be in the company of people of my race most of the time. Okay. Yeah, I say that's often true. Nicole, you are of my race, and I am in the company of you often. 5. 2, if I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of hassle-free renting or purchasing in an area in which I would want to live. What does that even mean?
Well,
3, like I'm not going to be discriminated against,
right.
or
Yes.
I can afford it.
That's where they're hinting.
Oh, yes. 3, I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. Okay.
In this area, I don't know that.
Yeah. Well, as a white woman,
I don't know.
If I move into certain neighborhoods in Seattle, I'm on Capitol Hill, I might have some other white youngsters shouting at me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say 0. And again, this is a worksheet that educators at a particular district are having to fill out. Someone help me understand here. 4, I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. I mean, for me as a woman, that might be 0.
Again, downtown Seattle.
Yeah. Does this qualify for as downtown Seattle? 5, I can turn on the television or open to the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely and positively represented. Are they really suggesting that in Seattle there isn't an overly exaggerated effort to do just that? It's ridiculous. 6, when I'm told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my race made it what it is. 7, I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the contributions of their race. 8, I can go into most supermarkets and find the staple foods which fit my racial ethnic traditions. I can go into any hairdresser's shop and find someone who can cut my hair. 9, whether I use checks, credit cards, or cash, I can count on my skin color not to work against the appearance of financial reliability. 10, I can arrange to protect my children most of the time from people who might mistreat them because of their race.
I'm laughing because Daryl just commented. He says, so far my black ass is very white privileged. Who knew?
11, I can swear or dress in secondhand clothes. I can swear or dress in secondhand clothes or not answer letters without having people attribute these choices to the bad morals, the poverty, or the literacy of my race. 12, I can do well in a challenging situation without being called a credit to my race. Do people really use the phrase, you're a credit to your race anymore? Like, what year is this? 13, I am never asked to speak for all the people of my racial group. Okay. Again, this is a handout given to white employees at a local school district.
It may be given to all employees.
No, because it says white privilege at the top of it. Are they going to give a form on white privilege
Well, yeah.
to someone who's not white?
Maybe they're expecting that person to rank low. I don't know, but how do you discriminate that way?
What happens if you take it, you're not white, and then it turns out, well, I got white privilege. Well, Daryl says he took it. Daryl, I want you to take that and add up your score, okay? And then we will determine whether indeed you do have white privilege. And then you're going to have to come to terms with that, buddy. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Can you imagine getting a job and that's what you're handed to fill out? I would hand it back and I would walk out the door.
I would too. I would not fill that out.
That's insane. And again, this is the theme of today's show is division is a choice. This is forcing divisions where divisions do not exist.
Right.
This is ridiculous. And so this
and even if you say they're trying to, help just like keep people from discriminating more or just make people more aware of their biases, whatever, that's not helping. Like that just makes it a laughable as we're all laughing at it.
It's absolutely
ridiculous.
Insane. And I mean, the only appropriate kind of questions that I could see for someone who's coming into a school environment is, hey, are you a racist? Like, hey, what do you expect them to say? And they fill this out and it's all fives and they're like, oh, I have white privilege. And then what do you do with them?
Right.
What do you do? It's ridiculous.
Which is what we've asked of the company that printed this. And we're not sure if they charge for their services.
Let me talk about that quick because this is a handout from Pacific Educational Group. And we've reached out to them and we looked up what they're about. So they have this effort called Courageous Conversations. It says, we engage in sustained partnerships featuring training, coaching, and consulting with organizations. Do you have these, Nicole?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. I was on there too, shot.
Nicole was very interested in what was happening. Sometimes I like to put up what I'm reading for other people so they can read it too if they're watching. So it's called Courageous Conversations. We engage in sustained partnerships featuring training, coaching, and consulting with organizations to transform beliefs, behaviors, and results so people of all races can achieve at their highest levels and live their most empowered and powerful lives. And I agree with that. I want people of all races, no matter what you look like, where you came from, to be able to achieve your best possible life. I fail to see how that handout does that. That handout to me feels like it's about making white people feel really bad about themselves. That doesn't make any sense. And then, so Pacific Educational Group, which again, their effort is called Courageous Conversations, but it says that Pacific Educational Group is a consulting firm committed to forging racial equity. Says it's been around for 30 years. Says we believe systemic racism is the most devastating factor contributing to the diminished capacity of all people, especially people of color and indigenous people, to achieve at the highest levels. It fractures our communities and erodes the support and nourishment we would otherwise receive from them. We cannot hope to eliminate the racially predictable outcomes of our lives unless we first discuss race and racism in a way that is earnest, honest, and sustainable. Do you really mean to tell me that you think that checklist is earnest, honest, and sustainable? Do you really mean to tell me that you think that making a white teacher sit there and answer all those questions and rate their level of white privilege on a scale of 0 to 5 is earnest, honest, and sustainable? Do you think it really contributes to fixing the fractures in our community? I am dying to know how. I would love to have these people on who are behind this Pacific Educational Group. And I know that we're reaching out to them. We're hoping that they're going to explain this. And I also, as Nicole said, do they charge schools for that? Is our taxpayer money going to fund those handouts and those quizzes on white privilege being given to educators? That's insane. And we wonder why our schools are getting more and more woke when it comes to political and social indoctrination in schools. It's because probably the good teachers who wouldn't dream of doing anything like that see a form like that and they're like, this isn't the job for me. And then teachers who eat that up, they're the ones, and then they engage in some of the behaviors that we've seen school districts engage in. Really unbelievable stuff. And so again, we are working, the person who sent us the flyer asked us not to name the school district, so in order to use the flyer, we had to respect that. However, we are working to additionally confirm what school districts might be using it. Perhaps it's more than one, perhaps it's standardized, and we're also reaching out to the company behind it. Just ridiculous stuff. All right, coming up next, maybe my favorite video of all time. I'm going to put it out there. Maybe my favorite video of all time. And it comes from a school in Colorado. So we'll have that coming up next as we dip outside of Washington State. But first, I've loved to hear that so many of you have taken the First Mark Challenge on my recommendation. Mike and I took it. We ended up moving over to the First Mark family. Now, all of our insurance is handled by First Mark, and we love that kind of one stop. If we have anything happen that we need to file a claim for, our first call is to First Mark, and it's just wonderful. So Dave Taylor, he's the CEO of First Mark, also a Marine, so you know that we love the guy. He talked about the First Mark Challenge and really what they hope that you'll get out of it.
We believe and we say that we will help 100% of the people that we work with. Okay. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that 100% of the people we work with are going to become First Mark clients, but we believe that we will actually help 100% of the people, whether that be stay with your current carrier, but let's modify your coverage a bit so you're better protected, or ultimately, hopefully come over to First Mark. We're going to put you with a different company and give you better coverage, right? So the challenge is really challenging individuals to give us an opportunity to prove that to them. That's really what the First Mark Challenge is.
And I've been saying that it's really a win-win because I heard from a subscriber the other day who said, oh, I had my mom take the First Mark Challenge. They came back and said, actually, you did really good. You have great insurance. We recommend you keep what you already have and you don't need us. And that's an honest company that's going to tell you what they think you should do when it comes to your insurance and what's best for you in your specific situation. And then there are other instances. I've heard from a subscriber who's saving $100 a month on their insurance and they still have wonderful insurance. It's $1,200 a year. So try the First Mark Challenge, firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. If you do take it, tell me how it goes. Firstmarkinsurance.com. They work for you. Okay, let us dip outside of Washington State down to Colorado. So there was a 12-year-old student there. His name is Jaden, and he was kicked out of class yesterday. This according to an ex-user named Connor Boyack, and it's been reported in several places. So he was kicked out of class in Colorado because he had a backpack on. And his backpack had several patches attached to it. And one of the patches happened to be the Gadsden flag. So little Jaden goes to school with his backpack, which had the Gadsden flag patch on it. And the school didn't like that very much. So the school's director found that patch to be, quote, disruptive to the classroom environment, and calls the kid's family in about the kid being kicked out of class. And Jaden's family ended up videotaping what transpired. And as I said, it is a glorious video in every sense.
The reason that they do not want the flag, the reason we do not want the flag displayed, is due to its origins with slavery and slave trade. That is what was, that is the reasoning behind why we do not want it displayed.
The Gadsden flag.
The don't tread on me.
Okay. Which is the Gadsden flag. Okay. Okay. So he's what's going to happen if he doesn't take it off?
He is able to go. I was actually just telling him, like, I was upset that he was missing so much school. I'm like, so I asked if can he just take his stuff out of his bag and go back to class. Like, I just want him to go back to class. The bag can't go back. It's got the patch on it because we can't have that in and around other kids. So that's what I was trying, and then he said you were close. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with slavery. That's like the Revolutionary War patch that was displayed when they were fighting the British. Like that's the revolution. Maybe you're thinking of like the Confederate Confederate flag.
Okay, I am
Is there
just
history
here to
that
enforce.
No,
I am here to enforce the policy that was provided by the district, and definitely you have every right to not agree with it. I mean,
because the
absolutely.
ACLU says that he's allowed to wear that. If you like go on their website, it's like says in big letters.
All I'm saying is that
unless there's like a ban on patches, period. Like if you said there's no patches allowed at the school, you cannot display what you think or anything like that, or what cheer or anything like that. I think it's like one-sided, because you allow some patches but not other patches.
Kids have patches like other names and like the American flag on their backpacks.
Yeah. that was like flown during the revolution with, I just don't understand that at all.
So what I can do is
And if you go onto the ACLU's website, let's talk to someone, because I don't want a lawsuit. I really don't.
I can have you speak to Jeff Yoakum. The last thing I want is him out of class.
Yeah, I know, me
that's all,
too.
like,
He
the last
takes
thing I
his
want.
classes seriously,
Yes.
he studies, he wants to get straight A's, he did that. He made honor roll when he was here before.
Yep.
He intends to do that again right now, but it's hard because he keeps missing class for this. So,
I understand that.
yeah, and I mean, we teach him to always stick up for your beliefs, and I mean, you're going over the revolution for 7th grade. I mean, the founding fathers stood up for what they believed in against unjust laws. This is unjust.
Okay, like I said, we are upholding a policy that was provided to us, which we have to uphold.
Okay.
Just that family. Oh my God, I love it so much. That's the best thing I've ever seen. First of all, if you're only listening on the podcast today, this 12-year-old sitting there like smirking because he knows that this woman has no idea what the flag means. She's talking about, its ties to slavery and the slave trade. The mom's like, are you thinking about the Confederate flag? Are you confusing it with something? And I just laugh because, again, what is the theme of today's show? It's division is a choice. Division is a choice. And what that school is doing is a choice to create division where division doesn't exist, other than look at it as an opportunity to inform themselves about what that flag means and to allow other students to inform themselves about what that flag means, and they can decide, do they like the flag or not? I find it kind of hilarious that, you have some of these symbols from history that, sure, sometimes they get co-opted by fringe organizations who will fly them and use them in furtherance of whatever end that they're seeking in the moment. And it's like almost like the American flag to some extent. If you have people who have a vehicle with a patriotic flag on it, I'm sure you have some far leftists who are like, oh, MAGA Trump supporter. It's like, and they want to assign meaning to flags based on the person who's flying a flag and what their personal beliefs are. No, people from today can't co-opt the meaning of the Gadsden flag and now it's ruined for everyone. No, that flag is about the American Revolution. That flag, the snake on the flag represents the colonists who were fighting for their freedom. And it was saying basically to the British government and to the monarchy, don't tread on us. If you step on us, we're going to bite you. And that's what they did. And I think the meaning behind that flag is remarkable. And it speaks to who we are as a country. Now, if people have co-opted it for other reasons or other purposes, that doesn't ruin what the initial flag was all about. And again, it's a school. You're a center for education and for learning. Teach the kids that. Say, hey, Jaden over here, he's got this patch. Some people have issues with it. Let's talk about what that patch means. Or like the mom said, we're presuming it's the mother who's talking to this educator and filming the encounter. Otherwise, just ban all patches. Kids can't have any patches. They can't have a pride patch. They can't have an American flag patch. They can't have a Black Lives Matter patch. They can't have a Gadsden patch. But that's not the rule. And it's so painfully clear to me that this woman, this school administrator, genuinely doesn't know and didn't take the time to know before they pulled this kid out of class and tried to preach to the mom about, oh, I can't have this patch there. She had no idea what it was. And it's actually a little glorious that she doesn't realize that she actually perfectly represents why that flag exists in the first place. Government overreach. Government interference in our lives. That's what the colonists were fighting against. And now you've got this kid who wants to wear this patch to school and a school administrator who doesn't even know what it means but wants him to rip it off or he can't go pursue an education. Crazy stuff. But I'm going to say that is one of my favorite exchanges. I know there are some people who might think, okay, the parents are keeping him out of class and out of his education. Just remove the patch and send the kid back to class. But I agree with the parents on this one. I agree with the parents. Either the school has to have a policy where it's consistent across the board. They're trying to, as she said, we're trying to teach our kid to stand up for what he believes in. And I'm assuming that if he's wearing that patch so proudly, and given the fact that he's sitting there smirking as the school employee clearly fumbles on what the flag even means, I'm assuming he knows what that flag means and he's been taught that. And so, yeah, I tend to agree with the parents that it's like, no, you stand up for what you believe in, and the school policy needs to change. Nicole?
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I think it's obvious that he was taught by his parents what that flag means. And this is a continuing the lesson. And I think sometimes it appears in education that they think they're the only ones that should be educating the kids, and what they say is the way it is. And we're seeing all of these opinions and feelings getting mixed into education. And I think this is a really good example of where the truth behind history and behind education is being lost.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, about the theme of our show, division is a choice, and dealing with these things that pop up in a way that only furthers our division. That's a choice. That's a choice that school is making. Instead of an opportunity to learn, to educate, to grow, and to realize that, yeah, sometimes we have differences of opinion, and we can exist in the same space, and that's fine. And if you don't like the patch, don't look at it. And now, that being said, do I think that any patch should be allowed? No. I think that there are obviously going to be some things that are not appropriate in a school setting that really would cause and are cause for concern.
Right.
But the Gadsden flag is not one of them. As the mom said, you're about to teach 7th graders the history of the American Revolution.
Right.
What better symbol is there?
And I mentioned there was another story that just came out within the last week where a student was pulled from school, an older driving student was pulled from school by their parents because he couldn't fly American flags on his truck. However, there was a blanket policy of no flags on trucks. So I'm like,
okay,
so
fine.
I think, okay, I think that it's a little obnoxious to make such a big deal out of it when it maybe, they tried to blanket the policy. Now, I get where it's a little extreme, but it's not like, all of the schools fly flags. They're not trying to necessarily, you could argue that they're not trying to hide the flag. They're just trying to keep kids from trying to be the center of attention. And
right.
I'm okay with that too.
Yes.
I'm
okay with that as well. And sometimes those people with those big flags flying from their trucks, I'm like, that's blocking some view. Can you see out your back window with that thing flopping around back there? But
I smile every time pretty much.
Consistency is key. If there's issues, then just be consistent about it. But yeah, this is ridiculous. And I just love that kid. And it reminds me of my dad, who the first word he taught me to spell was Constitution. And he wanted me to understand the importance of it and to fight for it and to know it. And I think it took me a long time in life to realize why he did that and why he was so obsessed with teaching me about that. That's cool. It's also a little weird, but that's
weird,
okay.
But cool.
But now this 12-year-old kid, he'll always have that memory of, hey, my parents made me stand up for what I believed in and fight for what I believe in, and also to bear the consequences of that. And I think that's important. The parents were not saying, let him back in class. They weren't saying that. They were saying, we taught him to stand up for what he believes in. And we know that the consequence is that, and he knows that the consequence is that he's not going to be able to go back to the classroom.
Right.
And he's making a decision that he's not going to go back if that's what you're going to make him do. So yeah, sometimes you have to deal with these things, and there are going to be consequences, fair or unfair. And I think that's a wonderful lesson to teach that young man.
I do.
Well. See, one of my favorite videos ever. I just love the little look on his face where he's like, this lady.
She doesn't know what she's talking about.
This lady needs to learn a little bit about history.
Apparently when he left, he told his mom, let's go to the news station because that wasn't right.
Oh, I love that so much. But it's also like there are a lot of adults who misinterpret American history. And I think the Gadsden flag is one of those often misinterpreted and maligned symbols of American history because there have been people who've co-opted it for other reasons. But you don't have to believe in all those reasons just because you understand what that flag is all about. That doesn't mean you're adopting the views and beliefs of every single person who's ever flown that flag from the founding fathers until the end of time. That's ridiculous. Okay, we're going to get to questions and comments from the live stream coming up next. But so usually this is where we read an Eastside Weight Loss Clinic spot. Do I have permission to share this? Did she give us permission to share this story?
Yeah, she did.
Oh my gosh, you guys. I got an email that just makes me want to cry about Eastside Weight Loss. So we get, messages not infrequently from people who use our sponsors and they have great success. And we like to hear that because sponsors help make the show possible. So using our sponsors and doing business with them is really, really important. But we got, the first message came to us, I think it was back in June, from a woman named Nicole who said, hey, Brandi and Nicole, just wanted to say hello. I love you both. Miss Story like crazy. I also wanted to say I will start my Eastside weight loss journey tomorrow. I spoke with them back in January, but I couldn't see paying that much money. Well, May 1st, my husband of 30 years went to work and had a massive heart attack. Sadly, he didn't survive. As I have learned many lessons, one I heard yelling at me loud and clear was to get healthy, not only for myself, but for my 3 kids. So thank you for continuing to talk about this program. Now, we just got an update from Nicole, who messaged us yesterday and said, "Hi, Brandi and Nicole. I just wanted to say I'm on my last day of the reduction phase and I have lost 33 pounds. I will be doing another reduction phase after the maintenance period. Thank you for talking about your journey. I wouldn't have known about Eastside Weight Loss Clinic otherwise." I'm going to cry today.
That's pretty special.
She lost her husband, said, you know what, I need to prioritize my health, ended up following through with the program. She's on day 60 today of the first phase of the program, and she's down 33 pounds. And I can relate to that because I'm down 36 pounds on the program. But Nicole, thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm devastated for you, first of all, for your loss, obviously. But, the fact that you took that and you said, okay, I need to really reevaluate my priorities in life and get myself healthy. And the fact that this has worked for you makes me so freaking happy. So thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate it. And again, if you have a story about using one of our sponsors that has worked out for you, we'd love to hear it, or hasn't worked out for you, but we'd love to hear it anyway. So if that resonates with you in any way, check out eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. You can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and ask him any questions you have before you commit to doing the program, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Oh, you got me all choked up today. Okay, let's get to questions and comments before we get to our closing sanity check. I think we had a couple super chats today. Yeah, I love it. Leland Taylor with the super chat. I told my wife that I spent every lunch hour with a couple women named Brandi and Nicole respectively, and it's sometimes spicy. Where's the lie? True. Where's the lie? Yesterday was particularly spicy. If you joined us we did our live Q&A last night with subscribers, and we did it by candlelight. Not because the power was out, because we wanted to.
Yeah,
it was not? At night. It's Nicole and Brandi after dark. I said on the show, our tops were on. Because Mike was joking with me. He's like, oh, you're doing a little candlelight? I was like, yeah. He's like, but you're wearing clothes, right? I was like, yeah, we're wearing clothes. Larry Olson in a super chat says, thankful today for you and Nicole. Much appreciation for your efforts. Also, First Mark consultation tomorrow. Good. Okay, tell us if you save some money. But I love you guys are being so nice to us today. What is it? Because I said I was stressed yesterday.
Probably.
And people are like, there's probably this secret chat that's like, hey guys, be nice to Brandi today because she's super stressed out, which I love. On Bob Ferguson and his office's involvement in the hiding of these new rates from PSE, Heidi says, unbelievable. My trust is completely gone in our government and they continue to get away with it. This is why they lie and cheat. They are untouchable. Usually I trust people until they prove me wrong, but the government's the opposite. I'm not going to trust you until you prove otherwise. And I think that's the case here. Charlie K said, obviously the in good faith response is intended to try to intimidate and is just deflection. And I agree. It's like, again, I have been vocally opposed to a lot of what Bob Ferguson has done. His office knows that. His spokesperson knows that. But they don't get to pick and choose whether they're going to only answer people who come to them in good faith. That doesn't make any sense. I keep going back to, and one of my biggest pet peeves in government is publicly paid spokespeople who try to keep information from the public. And there are, and I'll say even in Jay Inslee's office, Jamie Smith is Jay Inslee's communications director. I have rarely had any sort of qualms or concerns with Jamie Smith. Jamie Smith, I think, is one person who recognizes that her fundamental responsibility is to get information out to people. So there are offices that have good and bad examples of publicly paid spokespeople, and they have good and bad examples of people who understand, like, look, I might not like this reporter very much. I might not like this podcaster very much or this talking head very much, but my job is not to decide to respond to them based on whether I like them or not. And so, yeah, I think it's just a pet peeve of mine. So hopefully we get more information now that we've clarified that it doesn't matter whether our question is in good faith. Matthew Cook says, the Seattle Times praising Ferguson for being transparent with campaign finances. That's like me having a party for my daughter doing her homework. Oh, and that's so true. You don't need an op-ed praising someone for doing something they should have done anyway. That's a good point. And it's a point I did not make during the segment. You don't have to use the heft of your opinion page to praise a man who wants to be the governor for doing something that he never should have had to be convinced to do in the first place. Sharon Barber says, I'd love to think Bob Ferguson won't get elected, but I don't have much faith in King County voters as well as Pierce or Snohomish. Listening from Winthrop here in beautiful Okanagan County. Oh, I love Okanagan County. It is so gorgeous out there. That's one of the places where when I first was kind of exploring the state for the first time, I could not believe how vastly different it looked than this side of the state, and also how vastly different people acted out there than a lot of places on this side of the state. That's kind of around where Dory really loved. Didn't they have a house around Winthrop?
Yeah. Closer to Chelan. But.
Yeah, kind of in that area. And he was always talking about how it's just God's country. It's so beautiful out there. On white privilege, Crafty Grandma Crispy says, is anyone positively represented on the front page? Oh, on the front page of a newspaper or something? Because they said, oh, look at it. Well, I suppose it could be a magazine. Yeah.
That was one of the questions.
But yeah, you could have I think I almost think the media goes too far in its diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, where they're like, okay, like you've got 50%, or like, what is the population of the U.S. that's white? Can you Google that? Mm-hmm. I would say my guess is it's like 70. Now let's see how close I am. But I mean, if you go and look at the front pages of magazines, do you think 70% of the people on it are white?
That's a pretty good guess. 75%.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think they're trying to like make up for, really crappy treatment of people of color in this country, for sure. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to talk about what is equal, be careful, because I don't know if that's actually being reflected in today's society and media environment. Country Guy says, I think my Asian husband can answer yes to all of those too. Did we get a score? Did Daryl give us his score on the white privilege exam?
Let me check.
Although I might add, and I always joke about this, I think we have the most diverse news operation in the state. King 5, eat your heart out. Right?
Get it.
KUOW, I have 2 staffers. Half of them are people of color. 50%. Also, half of them are veterans of the U.S. military.
There you go.
I'm basically,
beat us.
Like I said, King 5, eat your heart out. It's like, don't come to me about DEI. And half my staff are women.
That's right.
What's going on here? Okay, let's see here. Jay says it follows the woke training Washington State teachers have to take, which I'm procrastinating on. Oh, do you have to take it? Jay, send us emails.
Yeah, send
us screenshots. Richard says, the objective is exactly that. Weed out the real non-woke educators. The left has always operated this way. Cuba used similar questionnaires and oaths. Why said, I've never seen more skewed questionnaire than this. I mean, it's so obvious what they're getting at, eye roll. And this is racism against white Caucasian people. Yeah. Okay, question. Daryl says, what are your thoughts on the supposed lockdown coming up soon? You mentioned this on the live Q&A last night, that there's rumblings.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of rumblings.
But I haven't heard anything confirmed.
No, I think it's this assumption, because there have been, since last night when we talked about it on the Q&A, there's actually been like football games canceled because of COVID outbreaks, and different schools are in lockdown on the East Coast, I think, Midwest maybe.
Don't do it, Jay.
I think they're going to be shut down. And I think that's also why we didn't get to this story today. But there's a story from the CDC about COVID deaths not being linked to COVID.
Yeah. So of all recent deaths reported, which I think is only a few hundred across the country over the period of time they were talking about, only 1.7% of them were attributable to COVID alone, and not COVID and something else.
Those are out there stories where I think those were getting muffled.
Yeah, and then, but in Washington State, that rate is more like 2.4% are attributed to only COVID. So we're talking about a minute fraction of deaths that are attributed only to that virus, and not to someone who has comorbidities, might have other underlying health issues that even if they got the flu could be disastrous for them. So it's just ridiculous.
I do want to I'm going to have to look up some of the local coverage of the cities that are having these lockdowns, because I mean, I just think it would blow up in their faces here.
It's not going to happen.
I don't think so.
Well, by it's not going to happen, I wouldn't put it past Jay Inslee, but I don't think that you're going to get any sort of true level of adherence to a lockdown. I mean, maybe in Seattle, but that's okay. I don't go there very often anymore anyway. Okay, sorry, I'm going a little long today. Jeremy says on the Gadsden flag, a school that doesn't know the history of a flag scares the crap out of me. That's true. But you could see it on that woman's face, like when she was being challenged by the mom about, are you confusing it with something? She's like, well, it doesn't matter. I was like,
if you didn't know, at least look it up before you walk into this conversation and claim it's something that it's not, because you don't know. I'm curious who gave her that information, because it must have been his teacher, I assume, or some staff member that saw it.
And is like, oh, I saw the Proud Boys flying that, so it must be a racist flag or something like that.
No idea.
But I will say that I can see them in some weird, twisted way connecting it to slavery, because it was during a period of our country where people owned slaves, right?
However, their favorite thing to do.
That is.
Say it's old, so it's slavery.
Right. So
slavery.
Then you have to remove everything that happened before emancipation from curriculum, from anything in schools, because then that would be disruptive. If you're going to tie everything that happened in this country during the period of slave ownership, which was horrendous, then you can't, then you got to cut out a bunch of stuff from history, because that is an unfortunate period in our country. But not everything happening during that period was about slavery, was fought over slavery, for instance.
So annoying.
Simple stuff. All right, Hendrickson Homestead says, oh, I like that. Is that a family called the Hendricksons that have a homestead? I'm always interested in homesteading, because one day I'm leaving all this behind for a homestead, and I'm never returning a call. Maybe yours.
I know.
You'll have to send me a pigeon mail. That's the only way it's getting to me. You got to train a pigeon, and you got to train a pigeon to take a letter to me, or else I'll never see you again.
I kind of like that idea.
So we have taught our kids cursive, even though the schools don't teach it anymore. Reason behind... Can you move your little cursor? Reason behind they need to be able to read our founding documents without it being transcribed for them. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, like the original forms and all that beautiful cursive writing and stuff. Yeah. So, I feel like I'm having extra fun on the show today.
Yeah, Tuesday was better than your Monday.
I was just angry yesterday.
Yeah,
but not at you guys, not at the show. All right, let's see if we can't up my level of anger in our closing sanity check. Actually, no, I'm not going to let this bother me, because of the theme of the show today. Division is a choice. Feeling divided is a choice. And this story also is in keeping with that theme. So remember in Seattle during the Chaz Chop Occupied protest on Capitol Hill, there was a business up there, Molly Moon's Ice Cream, that put up a sign. And the sign was directed at police officers. It says, Molly Moon's is a gun-free zone. Please do not come inside if you're wearing a firearm. And obviously that means no cops can come in. Because if you're in your uniform as a police officer out in public, you're going to have your gun on you. You're not just going to leave it somewhere. That doesn't make any sense. So that was their way of saying we don't want cops in the store. So we're seeing something similar happening in San Francisco. This is the article from KRON Channel 4. San Francisco restaurant bans armed officers, and the police union responds. It says one San Francisco restaurant is feuding with police officers. Reams, California, in the Mission District, is going back and forth on social media with the San Francisco Police Officers Association. It implemented a policy that bans armed police officers from entering the business. And here is a little clip of a story on the saga from NBC Bay Area.
SFPOA sent us the email response they say they got from Reams on August 23rd, saying simply, at Reams, we do have a policy not to serve anyone that is armed and in uniform, adding officers are welcome when they're off duty and not armed.
Hey, if that's your policy, then just post it for everyone to see. Right? Like, we don't have to play these games.
The officer in this case said in a statement he was disappointed. Officer Vincent Fontella said in part, I politely left because I believe that police officers and community members should spend more time listening to each other than shouting at each other. But you can't do that when your presence isn't wanted and your money is no good.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I could get upset about this. I could let it bother me. And certainly I think it's wrong. But at the end of the day, as I've been saying, division is a choice. Letting things further divide us, further divide you from other people is a choice. And I think the best way to handle a story like this, if it bothers you, is to never step foot in an establishment like that. And just to let your pocketbook speak for itself, and to not go places where you're not wanted, to not go to businesses that seek to divide us and create division where division doesn't exist. I think that's the best way that we can stay sane, is to forcefully reject these efforts to make us feel like we have less in common than we do, to make us feel like we shouldn't like each other who are different, each other if we look different, if we have different professions. So division is a choice, and each of us get to decide, especially in today's climate, every single day if we want to partake in the division. And I encourage you not to, and to say no at every possible opportunity. All right, that has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Nicole, thank you for being here too.
Thank you, Brandi.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm having too much fun today. I got to go home. I got to see my dogs. If you've not become a subscriber already, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. Help support our mission and our movement to give common sense a comeback. See you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon.